Hello and welcome to Women on Top with Holly Madasser, where the conversations focus on women, wealth, and social change. Holly and her guests, who represent many different fields, engage in transparent conversations that reflect professional and personal struggles as well as accomplishment. Some are making strides to address societal problems. Others have chipped away at the proverbial glass ceiling. All are supporting the financial future and well-being of women. Through these conversations, we learn about embracing a purpose and lifting others up while ensuring our own future success. Now, here's your host, Holly Madasser.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Women on Top with Holly Madasser. I'm Holly Madasser, and I'm joined today by Dr. Patricia Rivera. Dr. Rivera is a professor of medicine in the Division of Pulmonary Diseases and Critical Care at the University of Rochester Medical Center. As a pulmonologist, Dr. Rivera specializes in lung cancer, early detection, staging, and treatment. She is not only a professor, but chief of the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care, and a practitioner, a published author. Most recently, Dr. Rivera became the president-elect of the American Thoracic Society and will be president beginning in May. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Rivera, welcome.
Thank you.
You and I have known each other for a long time, and I've admired and watched your ascent in the medical profession with great intrigue. But I have to tell you that one of the things that I've respected most about you is watching you navigate the career landscape, dare I say, in a still primarily male-dominated industry as a Latina woman and mother of three.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about your journey in that regard.
Absolutely. So I will start by saying that I did not think about being a physician when I was in high school or even in the first 3 years of college, although I come from a family of healthcare professionals, physicians, dentists, pharmacists. In the second year of college, a professor of biology approached me and asked me if I had ever thought about medicine as a career. It was difficult because I had been sort of told in high school, people like you don't go to college. That was the first bias. And then even in college, people like you don't do X, Y, and Z. But she was an inspiration, and she thought that I had talent and a gift, and she saw something in me. And I decided to change my focus and go into the pre-med. It meant, doing a lot over the summers, and I was working 2 jobs, but it was worthwhile. I was successful in gaining acceptance into medical school. And from then on, realized it was, I had made the right decision. It was the profession that really suited my passion and my vocation.
I think it's fascinating and instructive that even at that early age, it was the mentorship of another woman that really believed in you.
Yes.
That helped you believe in yourself, or at least even consider the possibility. Maybe you hadn't even considered the possibility because of this construct, this artificial construct out there that put limits on who you could be, right?
Absolutely. And I think when I think about my life, it's really been about the women who have mentored and women who have sponsored me, because I think that we forget that there are mentors and then there are sponsors, the people who say your name out loud in the room full of other people. And I think I've been very fortunate to have had many women in my life who have served those roles and who have been role models for me, because in healthcare, women who achieve leadership positions are very important role models, and they help us see what we can be. And that was really important for me. And even more so now, I see myself as that individual, because as a Latina and in leadership positions, there aren't that many of us. And it's an opportunity for me to show others like me that you can be this, and that there are many possibilities. But it is.
Yeah. Help me and the audience clarify for us because I keep reading statistics about how now more women are graduating from med school than even men. But what you're talking about is not new graduates. You're talking about the hierarchy, the people in control. It's still fairly male dominated. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a fair assessment. And I think, yes, if you look at over the last 50 years, medical school graduates, it's likely 50-50. So, we don't have, my grandmother wanted to be a physician in Cuba. She wasn't allowed to enter medical school because women weren't allowed into medical school. So she became a pharmacist. That's not the case now. But then the same is true for engineering and for other STEM professions. But once you finish your profession and your training, achieving roles in leadership. So in the healthcare or academic settings, that's being division chief, division of pulmonary, chairs of departments, the Department of Medicine or surgery, and eventually dean, provost of a university, and across cancer centers, being directors of cancer centers or deputy directors. These are really important, critical roles in leadership across the healthcare system, and there are many others. And if you look at the demographics, women are less likely to be in those leadership positions, and women of color, so Latinas and Black women and women from other ethnic backgrounds are less likely to be in those positions of leadership. I think it's changing, but we're nowhere where we should be when we think about how the healthcare system is equally represented by women, right? So
right. There's definitely a lag effect, and let's just say the men have been at this a lot longer, and so they've populated those positions, and that's kind of become the status quo until, by sheer volume and also by assertiveness, perhaps, we began to change that. I mean, it's similar in the financial services industry. Still 4 out of 5 advisors are male,
right,
even though women control at least half the nation. Well, some would argue more than half, right? So there's not a good representation there. So tell us about your experience at the North Carolina. You were at UNC for a long time, years. Tell us about that experience.
Yes, I was at UNC for 27 years. I went there. My husband was recruited to UNC. We were both at Sloan Kettering. It was a fantastic place to work. It's an amazing institution in terms of its, clinical programs, the research programs. I was mostly affiliated with the Department of Medicine as a pulmonologist and the Lineberger Cancer Center, which is one of the most prestigious comprehensive cancer centers in the nation. So I was very fortunate, and I had many mentors and many sponsors and fabulous research collaborators. Dr. Louise Henderson and I have collaborated for more than a decade, and it has been an amazing, amazing opportunity for growth. But I reached the point where I had achieved a lot, everything I wanted to achieve: full professor, tenure track, excellent standing as a clinician, as a colleague, as an educator, and as a clinical researcher. But it was a tough decision to leave, but I wanted more. I felt that I could be more. It isn't about wanting more. I think sometimes we make that mistake, that we think, well, I just want more. And I just wanted to be more. I realized that I had potential for other aspects of career development. And that was
growth, right? Just the ability to continue growing.
Yes.
I think sometimes for women, and you tell me if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in my experience for women, you want the opportunity to continue to grow. You don't want to suffer from boredom and spend the last, 10 years of your career doing the same old that you've already done for the last 10 years. And yet I feel like sometimes that's perceived as overly ambitious or aggressive. And I think that's a stereotype that we as women, we need to confront that, because that's kind of what the world is saying about, well, why can't you just be happy? Right. Why can't you be happy with what you've got? Right.
Right. And I think, I do think that that's probably more of an issue for women than for men. But I don't think that men are devoid of that feeling of I want to be more, and I know I could be more. What will it take? But I do think it's particularly it was an issue for me, and there were many people. It's not about being bored. There are people who have reached full professor who are very happy, and they just
Right.
want to continue on that same trajectory. I believe that if you are the kind of individual like me who is always looking for ways to grow, to evolve, and particularly for me as a woman and as a Latina, it was important. It was important to be something else that potentially could inspire others to be something else, because I think that that's how men get inspired, right? They get inspired by their in other women. It was wonderful to think that, hey, what I do with my career and the decisions I make potentially could influence other in a good way. That's kind of like a neat legacy, right?
Yeah. And you yourself had experienced that, to want to, from that early mentor sponsor that you had in college, who pulled you aside and got you on this track because she believed in you and she helped mentor and coach you. How do you get there in this world? To be able at some point in your career to be able to do that for others, so that the journey continues beyond you, right? It's your legacy.
Right. And I think I've had many women, Diane Stover, who started the pulmonary division at Memorial Sloan Kettering in the 70s, and eventually was the division chief for decades, was the chief of internal medicine. She is a brilliant woman. Gosh, I think 10, 15, maybe longer. She said to me, just out of the clear blue, someday you're going to be president of ATS. And I thought,
And you thought it was absurd, right?
I thought it was completely, I said, oh, right. I remember that when I took the leap and decided, you know what, I'm going to apply for this. I heard Diane's voice, someday you're going to be president of ATS, something that, years earlier in my career, I never believed. It was like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
But I think it's important for all of us to say those things out loud to individuals that we mentor, or our colleagues, our junior colleagues in particular, right? I think that's the power of positive messaging. When you say things to individuals that makes them think about possibilities they may not believe are
Yeah.
potential, right?
Because you see something in them that they don't yet see.
Yes.
And they, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, suddenly start to strive for this unthinkable thing. They had never thought of it, but then they start to go for it, right?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I have to say that I've had many men who have been sponsors and who have advocated for me, and who have at UNC, who believed in me and who championed my decisions to apply for, the ATS leadership and go through the nomination and the election. So I think it isn't just about women in our lives, although
Yeah.
for me, that's been a major, you were a major influence in my life. You don't know that. When I was referred to you, it was very powerful. I learned a lot from you, and I think it gave me a lot of strength to think about, taking a little bit more control of the financial decisions, and in spaces where sometimes we feel, it's like a women, you're not good at math. I don't know how many times I was told that. Well, it turns out you are good at math. It's okay. So this is every day in our lives. We are constantly being influenced by individuals that we meet, hopefully in a positive way, often in a negative way. But I have always tried to capitalize on the positive ones. And then think about how you do it for others, right? Because it's this constant circle of mentoring and sponsorship that's critically important, particularly for women.
Yeah, I remember, and in the interest of transparency and for our audience, you and I met initially when you became a client of mine in the financial services industry. And I remember how amazed I was at you and your achievements and how you were juggling at the time 3 kids at home, a husband, your work, how frustrating that could often be, because it's hard. It's hard on women to be that primary person still. And we saw that with the pandemic. Women are still the ones, right, who are managing the household and the kids. But then to see you kind of, as your children launched, to not just stop. That's been very inspiring for me personally, is like you kind of made it by all external standards. You had achieved so much at UNC. You raised your kids successfully. You've got great kids. Your marriage is intact. You did it. You had it all. And yet you didn't want to stop. You felt like you could be more. And I've heard you talk about this, which is a term I had never heard, but the tiara syndrome. Just, I think girls are pleasers, and we're used to being in school, and you're used to, if I do X, then I get Y. It doesn't always work that way when you're out of school. You're just kind of waiting to get the Y after you did the X, and it doesn't come. So talk to us a little bit about what is that tiara syndrome and how do you overcome it?
Yes, it's so the tiara syndrome is a syndrome where particularly relevant for women. We believe that by doing all that we are being asked to do, and by doing a good job, and often by going above and beyond what we are being asked to do, to show that we are capable and we are responsible and we're bright and we're hardworking, that someone is going to recognize that we have those qualities, and they're going to think about us when a position comes, let's say, opens for a leadership position. It really has to do with advancing in leadership, at least in the healthcare profession, which is what I'm most familiar with. And I learned this from a former president of ATS, who we were having this women's forum, and she brought this up, and I read about it. She said, you have to take the tiara off, because the reality is that no one is likely going to come knocking on your door to say, hey, you're X, Y, and Z, and I think you would be perfect for this new position that's opening up. It's just not going to happen. So I think it's important to know that you've done all these things. You've been really hardworking, accomplished, and you're proud of yourself. That's why you put the tiara on, but take it off and go after that position, go after that job, go after that leadership opportunity. Because
and really just nominate yourself. I think that's the one thing I really heard you say in the years that we've worked together is, I was waiting for someone to nominate me. And then
someone, yes.
And I saw that it wasn't happening. And subliminally, you kind of start to internalize that, right? That I'm not getting nominated, probably because I just don't have the goods. I'm just not that person.
Right. I think that what happens is you begin to convince yourself that you're just not good enough, that you just don't have it in you, that you thought you were working really hard, and you thought you had done it really well, and you thought you had made a difference, but you're just one of many, and you're not good enough. And I think that's the chain that has to be broken, right? It's if you continue to think that way, no one's ever going to nominate you, and you don't have the courage to nominate yourself or apply. Sometimes it isn't nominated, but apply for the position, go after it. And I applied for many positions at UNC, and I didn't get them. That's okay. I may not have been the best candidate, but if I didn't apply, I would never have known, right? And I think the other important thing about the tiara syndrome is that, what Thomas Edison said, I haven't failed. I just have found 1,000 different ways to do it differently, right? So you try for something and you don't succeed, you try for something. We see this a lot in the world of research with grants. It is failure because you didn't get it, but you really have to continue trying and putting yourself out there. And I think women don't do that as well, and particularly women from underrepresented groups. We are a lot more, I think, vulnerable because we are really underrepresented. I mean, I think my sister sent me this data. I'm a full professor, a tenured professor, and I think I'm one of like 0.3% who are tenured professors in academic centers across the nation. So, when to get to a full professor is a big accomplishment in an academic career, but you see where that's even a small number. So I think it's critically important for us to take those chances. And if you believe that, one thing is being forced or pushed to do something that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
I don't advocate for that at all. Another thing is to push yourself and to do something that you believe you A, want to do, and B, you can do.
Yeah.
The other thing about the tiara syndrome is, and you probably see this in your profession as well, when you see a job you think you want, don't cross every box. You don't need to have every single requirement in the job description. You have to meet the majority, because you will always find people and build teams that have strengths in areas that you don't have, that you can work collectively together, and then you can lead a team. I think this notion of I have to be able to check every box, what happens is by the time you gain the experience to check every box, the job is no longer available. You're much older, and guess what? The opportunities are less.
And I think there's actually a study on this where there's a job available and you're in a room full of men and women, and the guys, let's say, meet 6 of the 10 criteria, and the women maybe meet 8 or 9 of the criteria. And when asked who thinks they're qualified for the job, the men raise their hands and the women don't. So this belief that you have to be 100% check marking everything, when those criteria are sort of subjective in and of themselves. I mean, I think women bring a different sensibility to different roles that aren't even maybe quantifiable or not one of the checkmark items, right? We see that in business and startups. Women who are on the C-suite of startups, those companies actually do better because there's not the group think of, let's say, an all-male advisory board.
Right.
Right. So I think that different sensibility is actually a plus, but that's not even listed as a criteria, right?
Well, and there's a lot of data that diversity in your teams and leadership really do a significant service to any organization. There's no question. You just have different critical thinking and different skills and sensitivity and cultural respect for everything that is pertinent and everything that we do within our organizations. But for me, it goes back to women. When I was invited to apply for the ATS position, and I went to a man and I said, "Oh, I've been invited," because I was invited to do this. And they said that I didn't have the credentials to be an ATS president. I didn't have the pedigree, and I wasn't a basic scientist. So I didn't apply. The following year, I was encouraged to do so by the then president-elect. He said, "You really need to do this as a Latina, as a woman. You can begin to break the glass ceiling." So I actually applied myself. I didn't wait to be invited that time. I said, "You know what? I went to the women at UNC who all said, 'Of course you can.'" Me thinking I don't have this experience. You could do this job so well. And I think it was fear of not checking all those boxes. And then when I was being recruited as division chief, I had the same sort of fear, like I don't know how to do that. I've never done this or this or this. And it was my chair, a woman, who said, "You do not need to check she reminded me, it's a collective experience. It is, having strategic goals. It's having the ability to communicate well, to mentor well, to sponsor people, and to really lead by example that makes a good leader." And sometimes you need people to remind you have those skills. I see you, right?
Right. And I think that's just such an important point, is that at some level, you have to not accept this narrative.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of courage, because you could be shot down, it could not work, but at some level, somebody who said to you, you just don't have the right pedigree for this role. I mean, you probably never want to whisper those words out loud again. You just internalize it and just stop trying, right? But somewhere along the line, something inside of you said, I am going to put my name in that hat. I'm not going to accept this. And I think that's the inflection point that we're at as women, is we get a lot of opportunities, but when it comes to that glass ceiling, just not accepting that narrative,
Right.
taking off the tiara and just saying, I am going to go for this, even if the establishment doesn't believe I should.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're right, absolutely right. You have to, if you want to accomplish new goals along your career, along your life, because it doesn't have, sometimes it's just life goals. It's important to stop and listen to yourself,
Yeah.
and if it's hard to get those voices out. And, I don't know, you probably follow the poet Rumi. I mean,
Yeah.
so beautiful.
With my heritage, yes.
Yes. And, there's one quote that I believe that I have finally come to live by, and it's: the inspiration that you seek is already within you.
Yeah.
Stop and listen.
Yeah. And maybe even more importantly, stop listening to the outside. In this world, especially, where people are just, it's a competitive world out there, right? It's not in anybody else's best interest necessarily to promote you. You have to promote you.
Right.
Well,
Although I want to just go, I do think it's in our best interest, though. I think part of being a mentor and a sponsor is to promote others. I mean, that's really what sponsors do. And I think it is it's in our interest to do that for diverse groups of individuals, because that's what strengthens our teams and our institutions and our organizations. So I very much believe in promoting yourself and advocating for yourself. But I am also a staunch believer that you must promote others and advocate for others.
And that's why you're in the position you're in. But dare I say that the establishment, or those old social norms, that's not the way it's been. It's not been as inclusive for diverse communities. And that's where you, as a woman and as a Latina woman, and myself, that's where we come in, where we can start to break that barrier.
Yes. I agree with you. It's been, the narrative was written way, way long ago, before you and I ever existed, and it will continue.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be, somebody asked me when I moved to Rochester, why did I want to be here? And I said, I really want to be part of a movement that's changing the narrative, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're kind of a change agent on the global scale, but let's narrow in also on what it's done for you personally. And I can say this as someone who has watched you over the years, is you went from, it's a job at some point, and I'm going to do it till X, I do this for a living. So I'm used to working with people who are like, I'm going to do it for X number of years, and then I'm going to retire, because it's just a job. So very rarely have I seen someone who has already raised their kids, has already accomplished so much, has lived in a community, in a place for, 30 years almost, pick up and move across the country and be so excited, re-energized about their career again, right?
Almost like starting over.
Yeah.
No, it was. And in fact, you may have forgotten this, but I actually sought your advice because I was thinking about retiring
Yeah.
around now. And I wanted to see what my, portfolio would look like, in the next 5 years. I can't remember
Right.
the breakdown, because I had reached a point where I said, well, I've done really well and I've accomplished a lot, but I don't see myself being able to accomplish additional goals. And is this really what I want to do for the next, 2 decades, or a decade and a half? And
Yeah.
and I didn't think that that's what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, maybe then
I'll just do something different.
something different.
Yeah.
And I think what the opportunity to start at the University of Rochester has given me is this infusion of passion and energy and goals that, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to build this. And what can I do here and make a small footprint? How do I leave something that's already really good better?
Yeah.
And it's very it's very powerful. But I do think it's important to say that it's something that people really they really want to do, because packing.
Yeah. Not everybody wants that. Right.
It's daunting. I mean, it's to start anew after 30 years at one institution, especially in academics. There's a saying, the institution doesn't love you, it's the people in the institution that love you. And you build these amazing relationships. And I remember a colleague at UNC said to me, you're so brave. When you walk the hallways, everybody knows who you are. And somebody said to me the other day, oh my gosh, we still talk about, well, my initials are NPR, Maria. NPR said NPR said this should be done, that would be done, because you build a name, you work so hard to build a good name so that your colleagues respect you, especially at academic institutions where there's so many wonderful, brilliant people. It's wonderful to know that you're really well respected by these, multidisciplinary colleagues. And it's hard to leave that, because you come to a new, and no one knows that you're really good at X.
You're kind of starting over again in that regard.
So and a friend of mine said, you're so brave, your courage, because I could never do that. I could never give up what I have built, the reputation I've built, and start new. But I think what was important for me was the ability to take on leadership opportunities that would allow me to use skills that I knew I had. I just knew I could do this well. And again, I have very fortunate because I have an excellent department chair, excellent colleagues in other divisions. I have within the pulmonary division people that I can trust and turn to for advice. So there is a lot of mentoring and sponsoring internally. You never do this alone, but it's given me the opportunity to accomplish goals I wanted to accomplish. And I think everyone should have that opportunity.
I am just so proud of you. I'm so grateful that you're willing to share this vital message to women today. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing, but I don't know if we have a few minutes, Hallie, but I often get asked this question by a lot of younger women, this having it all, a career, a husband, children. And I just want to say that you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Oh, that's hilarious, because I say that all the time. Yes, you can have it all, but not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
There's just different points in your life, because if you really want to be a good mother, or you really want to be a good employee or a good leader, it takes 100% of your effort.
And I think there are different stages in our lives. And, when my husband was a division chief for over a decade, and that was really important for me to be able to support him. That would not have been the right time for me to also be leadership. And now I'm getting that support from Ben. I think it's important for women in particular to realize that there are different stages in our lives and careers depending on our circumstances, because for some women it isn't children, it's caring for their parents or caring for siblings, so it's, we all have commitments in our personal life that have ebbs and flows. So I believe in this, and my mother taught me that. First of all, take the cape off. You're not Superwoman. Get help in anything that you can, and you can do it, but find when it's the right time for you.
The right balance and
Right.
being able to, I mean, if you're conscientious, and you are, I am, you want to do the jobs that are important to you really well. So sure, you can do it all at the same time, but how well can you do it all at the same time?
Right.
I think that's the question. And so if you really care about your family, your children, your career, there are different points in your life where you can dedicate more time to each.
Right.
And I think that's an important lesson. And life is longer than people think. I used to think when my children were smaller that, oh my gosh, I've given up so much for my kids. Well, before I knew it, in the blink of an eye, they were launched, and I had decades to have a career beyond them, right? It's just hard to see when you're in that moment.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wonderful to speak with you today. I'm so glad that you invited me to do this.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that you're willing to so openly share about your journey, and you're just an inspiration to all women. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Hallie.
Holly Madasser, CPA, is a partner and senior wealth management advisor at Stearns Financial Group, an investment management firm with offices in Chapel Hill and Greensboro, North Carolina. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Hightower Advisors, LLC is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Refer to brokercheck.finra.org for more information. This podcast is copyrighted and all rights are reserved. The content of this podcast is for information only and not intended to serve as financial, legal, medical, or any other form of professional advice.